Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'll be making some cards using Jaded Blossom's Coffee Slider die set. So there's 4 different dies included in this pack. And if you've been watching my videos this year, you'll know I have a little bit of an obsession making coffee themed cards. The funny thing about it is that I don't actually drink coffee because I don't care for the taste, although I love the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Now this is a large die. It fits on an A2 size card perfectly. Now I want to have my card base the same size as this coffee cup. So I'm placing it on a folded card base and I'm just shifting it off slightly. So the very top of that die is going off of the edge where the fold side is. Now when I run it through my machine, it's all attached together and I have this cute little coffee shaped card base. Using the same main coffee shaped die, I cut out another piece, this time out of some craft cardstock. I'll put some adhesive on the back and adhere it on top of the card base. So the very top of that craft piece will go off the edge of the card base, but it's very slight, so it really isn't going to make a difference. But you'll still be able to open up that card easily. I use some ATG and also some liquid adhesive. Just want to make sure it's all going to adhere flat. Next, I'm using some pattern paper from Photoplay. This is the Daily Grind collection. It's a fun 12 by 12 pack. I cut out 2 pieces using that tone-on-tone teal pattern paper, and I'll be assembling the little cozy. Is that what that's called? The little cardboard piece that slides around your cup so you don't burn your hand. So use the same die. You'll need 2 pieces if you want it to actually slide up and down around your cup. So you'll fold the one end in. It does have some little perforation marks, and then I'm putting some double-sided tape on that edge. I'll remove the backing, and just to make sure it is still going to adhere, I'm also putting some liquid adhesive on. So I'll start with one side, trying to line it up nice and straight, and unfortunately I did not get it straight. It's hard to do if you're not leaning over so you could see if everything's straight, but it's pretty close. You can see that little edge where I didn't get it perfectly lined up, but it's not noticeable when you have it around that card. So here you just pop in that card base and it looks like a little coffee cozy. Isn't that cute? Next, I'll add the lid to the cup. I use some dark brown cardstock for that. I really like the craft, the teal, and the dark brown colors together. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the card. I'm putting my acrylic block on top just for some extra weight while the glue adheres. Now it's time to decorate the front of that cozy. I've already stamped out the sentiment. I use the coffee break stamp set from Jaded Blossom, and also for those little coffee beans, I use their coffee banner die set. I stamped the sentiment on a stitched rectangle die cut, and I use their card mat dies for that. Just gonna glue it directly onto the little cozy. Now I'll add 5 of the coffee beans. And I use that same dark brown cardstock for the beans. Just trying to figure out placement. Wanted to have an odd number since that always looks a little nicer. And I'll glue them down directly using some liquid adhesive. You could pop them up for a little extra detail as well. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but the coffee beans all have that stitch detail along the outside edge and also the little line in the middle to make it look like a coffee bean. Put my acrylic block on top to let all of those adhere in place, and there is my finished card. You could decorate the inside of the card, or you could put a gift card in there. I think that would be really fun. Perfect gift maybe for a teacher or friend who really likes coffee. And if you are a big coffee fan, Jaded Blossom sells quite a few stamp sets and dies that are all coffee themed. For card 2, I'm using the other die that's included in the set, and you can cut out 2 of them to create a little slider. So this is the base portion of the coffee cup. I'll basically assemble it the same way I did for that coffee cozy. I'm putting the double-sided tape on that long side, so that was easy to fold in since it has those perforation marks. This piece also has those 2 small tabs at the very bottom. I'll also put some liquid adhesive. I was going to put some small pieces of the double-sided tape on those tabs, but they're pretty small, so I decided just to use some liquid adhesive. So now time to line it all up, and I did way better this time. So since I only have the liquid adhesive at the bottom, I'm trying to really press them in place so they're not going to come apart. So again, I'll just use that acrylic block and let those sit for a few minutes. So now I have this fun little slider, and I can just insert one of the coffee cups right in place. So now it's time to decorate. I'm using that same dark brown cardstock for the lid. I'll adhere it using some liquid adhesive, trying to line it up nice and straight. So now when I insert that back piece into the sleeve, it really looks more like a coffee cup. Isn't that cute? For the little cozy, I'm going to use some solid pink cardstock, but this time I'm going to trim off the very right-hand side. I'm not going to have it as a slider. Instead, I'll adhere it directly onto that background piece. I'll be using the coffee bean stencil to decorate up that little pink cozy. I'll tape it in place using some mint tape from scrapbook.com. Then I decided we're gonna have pink coffee beans instead of brown coffee beans. I'm using the Pucker Up color from Catherine Pooler, and I also have Catherine Pooler's new ink stand, which is awesome. It holds the ink pad and also the lid, and there's grips on the very bottom, so it's not gonna move on your craft table. So no more having to hold onto the ink pad while you're inking up your brush. It's really nice. And they do have magnets on the side, so if you do a lot of ink blending and you're using multiple colors at the same time, they'll just all hook together. I used just a light amount of ink. I didn't want the coffee beans to be too bright on the card, but there you can see that fun pattern with pink coffee beans. So for this sentiment, I'll be using Brewing Up Birthday Wishes for You, and I'll stamp this directly onto that cozy. This is why I wanted those coffee beans fairly light, since I want this sentiment to really stand out. I'll ink it up several times just to make sure it's nice and bold. Using the Mini Misty makes it so handy when you do need to ink your sentiment several times. Now I'll glue the cozy directly onto the slider portion of the coffee cup. Just using some liquid adhesive, trying to make sure to get it nice and straight. Put that acrylic block on top and let it dry for a few moments. Then I decided to stamp a sentiment on the coffee cup. So I'm putting it back in my Mini Misty, just gonna adhere it in place with my magnets, and I'll be using the Coffee Addict stamp. I'm just gonna put it at the very lower portion of that coffee cup. Using some scrapbook.com, I think it's dark chocolate color ink. It's a really nice brown. I only had to ink it up twice, so that was nice. Now I can just slide that coffee cup inside. It's so cute. I love the pink, brown, and white together. It's really pretty. Just for a little embellishment, I decided to add a little flower, and this is from Jaded Blossom's flower die set. I have pink for the flower and some shimmer white cardstock for the center, and I'll pop it up using a thin foam square. So there is my finished card. I think this one's really fun as well, and you could still easily add that gift card inside. And Jaded Blossom does have a die set that cuts the little slits to hold a gift card. I'll add a link in the description box for that. For card 3, I've already gone ahead and cut out another card base using the die. Have that dark brown cardstock for the lid. Not sure why I never used a different color, but I guess I really like the dark brown. Needed to trim off just a little bit of that white card base that was peeking out on the right. For the cozy, I used some more of the pattern paper, trimmed off the edge since I'm not going to have it as a slider. I'll adhere it to the card using some liquid adhesive. Didn't get it straight at first, so glad I was able to pull that up right away. I'm using Barely Art liquid adhesive, which does adhere really nicely, but you don't have a lot of wiggle room. And then I decided to trim down both sides just a little bit on that cozy. With school starting just around the corner, I decided I would make this a little teacher card. So I used the fall dies from Jaded Blossom, just the 2 apples. I've already stamped up the sentiment, thanks a latte, and all of the stamps are from that same coffee break stamp set. cut a fishtail on the right side, and I'll be layering that sentiment piece on some of that same dark brown cardstock. For the apples, I use some solid red cardstock. I love the little stitch detail. And the die set does have the inside piece so you could put the little seeds, but I decided just to use the main silhouette of the apples. I'll be adhering both of the apples on the left side of the sentiment, so you're not going to see the very edge of that sentiment strip. Although I did decide to trim it down a little bit more. I'll go ahead and adhere that in place. And I do have just a tiny bit of the fishtail going off the edge. So now I can attach my apples. I'll be adding some foam dimension in the areas where the apples go off of that sentiment, just to keep everything nice and level. And then I'll use liquid adhesive where it's attached to that sentiment strip. Put the large apple down first and then the small apple above it. Again, adding that foam dimension. Just a tiny bit of glue at the base of the apple. At first, I was going to leave the apple with that red leaf and stem, but I decided I would cut out the apples again from some brown and some green cardstock, and I'm trimming out the leaf and the stem. And these are really, really tiny, so this was challenging. I'm not sure I got it all perfectly trimmed out, but mostly. Now to attach them to the apple. I'll put the liquid adhesive on the red apple first, use my reverse tweezers to pick up that tiny, tiny stem and adhere it in place. And also the itty bitty leaf. And I'm using the tweezers to kind of nudge the piece in place before the glue adheres. Then I'll do the same thing to the larger apple. A little easier on the larger apple since the pieces aren't quite so small. Then to finish off the card, I'm using some red bling from my stash. Just adding 3 of them, 2 around the sentiment and 1 in the upper left-hand corner around the apple. So there is my finished card. I think this one is really fun as well. And again, you could add that gift card or attach it to a little gift basket. Now moving on to card number 4. I have the background cut out using the pattern paper. And this time I'll be using a scallop edge cozy. And this is from the Coffee Slider add-on die set. I have that dark brown cardstock for my lid. See, every single time I use dark brown. Just adhere that in place. And this pattern paper is fun since it's the reverse side of the front of that 12 by 12 pack. I love how they decided to use pattern paper on the back side instead of just white paper. So there's no waste at all. For the cozy, I did decide to trim off that tab so I won't have it as a slider. Just adhere that in place using some liquid adhesive. Then I cut out a few other pieces using the Coffee Slider add-on set. So I have this little strip that goes across and a little buckle in the shape of a heart. Isn't that cute? So I just slid that white piece inside and then I'll adhere it all in place using some liquid adhesive. I put the glue on the back side of that white strip first. Now I'll lift up the side of the hearts and adhere it down in place so it's not going to move. I cut out another little coffee bean using the coffee banner die set and I'll adhere it to the center of the heart. Now for this card, I decided to adhere it to an A2 size card base since it fits perfectly. Put some liquid adhesive and a little bit of ATG tape on the back and adhere it in place. Now there's not really a lot of extra room, so I couldn't add a matted layer. So I'll put my card front onto a card base. And this is 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. I think the craft cardstock looks nice behind that coffee cup. For this sentiment, decided to put it on the inside of the card rather than the outside. I'll use some more of the dark chocolate ink from scrapbook.com, and the sentiment is "Life happens over coffee." And to finish off the card, I'm adding some dark sparkle crystals, and these are from Studio Katia. I love this brown color and it has some little glitter sprinkles inside, so it matches nicely with that blue and brown. Put 2 of them in the lower right hand corner and 1 to the left of the coffee cup. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. Now moving on to card number 5. I'm not going to use the coffee slider die this time, but I will be using lots of other coffee themed products from Jaded Blossom. For the background of the card, I'm using that same teal pattern paper with the leaves. I'll be layering it on some dark green cardstock. And I also have just this small scrap of pattern paper. It was part of one of the cut-aparts, but I didn't have any of the sentiment on it, and I thought that brown looked really nice with the rest of the pattern paper. So I just have this small strip. I adhered that brown pattern paper to the lower right-hand corner, added a thin strip of the solid green cardstock, and I did put some scrap cardstock on the very left-hand side underneath that little strip, just to keep it nice and level. For the sentiment, I've already stamped this out on a stitched banner die cut. This is just wanted to espresso my thoughts. So I have the very end of that banner going off the edge, so I just flipped over that panel and trimmed it off. Put my card front onto a card base, and I do have just a little bit of that white card base showing. Next, I'll be adding a banner. This is all the little coffee beans. And the coffee banner die set does have more than just the coffee beans. Obviously, I just keep using them. But there's also the coffee cups, there's little coffee mugs, and marshmallows. It's really cute. So I used some of the craft cardstock for the main part of this banner. And then you can cut out all of the individual little pieces. So have more of those little coffee beans. And there is a second coffee bean that's slightly smaller, so if you want some of that banner to show, you could use the smaller size. I like the larger size that fits perfectly on the banner. So I'm just gluing all of those in place, and I did trim the banner down just a little. I cut off one of the beans so it would fit nicely at an angle. It is designed to fit lengthwise on an A2 size card. So attaching the very last coffee bean, and now on that little opening next to the sentiment, I used another die from that coffee banner die set, this time the coffee mug. So I cut it out using some white cardstock. For the cozy, I used that same pattern paper and just trimmed it down. Now I'm pulling out some Copic markers and coloring up the coffee cup. So I have two different colors, going for more of a craft color for the main part of the mug, and then of course my dark brown for the lid. So nothing fancy in my coloring, just doing it really quickly. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere my little cozy in place. So now I have this darling little miniature coffee cup, and I'll adhere it to the right of the sentiment using some liquid adhesive. Then to finish off the card, I'll add some more of the dark crystals from Studio Katia. I'll put two of them in the lower right hand corner, one above the sentiment, and two in the upper left hand corner. And I am using an embellishment wand to pick those up since they don't have adhesive on the back. I'll put a drop of Barely Art glue down first and then adhere those crystals in place. And that glue will dry clear, so you're not going to see that white edge around it. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 5. I really like how this one turned out. It's definitely more my style with all the layers. But do let me know which card is your favorite. Now here's a quick recap of the 5 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's Coffee Slider die set and some of their other coffee themed products. I don't make shaped cards very often, so these were really fun to make. And I think they'll be useful as well. Most of my family and friends love coffee. I live in Western Washington, so coffee is very popular. I'm in the minority since I'm just not a fan of coffee. I will have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products I used in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.